This is the story of my freshman year in college. I went to a smaller university. There were only a few thousand students that attended it, so the campus wasn't very large. But I liked that about this place. However, my first year, I had to live in the dorms. To save a little bit of money and maybe make a friend, I chose to have a random roommate. This decision backfired. I didn't know anybody at the college when I got there, and the first person that I met was the roommate. He told me that his name was Joe. Joe was a strange guy. Overall, he was rude, unfriendly, and he never left the room other than to go to class. He was not at all the type of person that I would normally hang out with. And by the second week, I had given up all hope of being friends with him. I had a TV and a PS4 that I brought with to school, and Joe said that I could never use it because it bothered him. He also demanded that all lights be off after dark. I tried to reason with him once, but he threatened to report me to the dean of students. I wasn't scared by the threat. I didn't really think they would do anything, but I would rather just try to get along with my roommate. Instead, I would do my studying in class buildings around campus. I made other friends at college pretty quickly, and when I was talking with them about Joe one day, they suggested that I get a new room. I hadn't even realized this was an option until they told me, so I put in a request to get my own solo dorm room. I was told that when one came available, they would contact me. About 2 weeks later, so now about a month and a half into the school year, I was contacted. I was told that I could move into a different dorm building that was across the street. This building was a little bit newer and nicer. It had a room that was available and I accepted it. I decided not to even tell Joe. I didn't know if he would be happy or sad about it, but I didn't want him thinking that I hated him or something. So one day, when Joe was gone at his classes, at a time that I didn't have class, I packed up all my stuff and just left. Without saying a word, my entire half of the room was now gone. I moved into my new building and got my new room. It was so nice to finally have a place all to myself. I could watch TV, play PlayStation, and not have any complaints. I could even have my friends over to hang out. However, I did want to be careful not to see my old roommate Joe. Like I said, it was a small campus, so there was a chance that we would cross paths. If we did, I didn't want him to ask me why I left or something. I was careful to avoid him, and I didn't see him at all for a couple of days. As for my new room, at first, it was great. But on probably the second or third night that I was there, something happened. I was playing video games late at night, and I heard somebody try to open my door. It was locked, so it didn't open. After a few seconds, I got up to look out of my peephole. When I was walking towards the door, I heard somebody knock on it. There weren't even that many people that knew I lived here yet, so I found this to be really strange. When I got to the door, I saw Joe standing there. I did not want to answer it, and I quietly moved away from the door. He knocked one more time, and I didn't answer that either. I was really creeped out. I mean, how did he even know that I lived here? I didn't tell him, and I wasn't friends with him on Snapchat or anything where he could see my location. This was really strange. I went back and looked like 10 minutes later, and he was finally gone. I didn't know why he had come here. There was no reason that I could think of. Well, the next morning, I got up and had to go to class. When I left my room, I walked down a couple of hallways to get to the front of the building. In one of the hallways was a sort of lounge study area. When I was approaching it, I saw Joe sitting in one of the chairs there. I couldn't believe that he was in my dorm building. He didn't live here. I didn't know what he was doing. I turned around and left out of another exit. I thought maybe he was following me. It was really strange. Later on in that same day, I was walking on campus and I happened to notice him again. There was sort of a lot of other people walking around, and I saw him a ways behind me. I walked back to my dorm building, and he seemed to almost follow me there. He wasn't walking close enough to follow me inside or anything, but I was very suspicious when I noticed. I got back in my building and was wondering what this guy's problem was. Well, that same night, he was back at my room. Once more, I was up late, and he tried entering. It was locked like always, and he then knocked on the door. This time, it was louder than before. I didn't answer, but was watching him through the peephole. He knocked again very loudly, but I still did nothing. When he knocked for a third time, I remember somebody else who lived down the hall opened up their door. They told him to quiet down. Joe didn't say anything. Then he stood there for probably a minute. After that, he backed up a step and then kicked my door extremely loud and hard. I was honestly afraid that the door might break, but it didn't. Joe then turned and stormed off. After this, I made up my mind that I was going to report him, and the next day I did. Somebody must have talked to him or something, because I stopped seeing him after that, and he did not return to my room. I was still very suspicious that he would follow me around or show up again or something for like a month, but luckily he didn't. A while after this, I met somebody that used to know him. They weren't really his friend, but had several classes with him. They told me that he had dropped out, and also said that his name wasn't even Joe. None of these things really surprised me. I'm not sure why he gave me a fake name, but he was a weird guy. Looking back, I'm really glad that I moved out when I did. Several years ago, when I was broke, I moved to a new city for a job. This job was not the most well-paying job, but it was decent. Because I had no money going into it though, I had to find a cheap place to live. I ended up going onto Craigslist and finding a roommate there. I know that sounds sketchy, and the truth is that it is sketchy, because the guy that I was roommates with was weird. At first, he seemed normal enough, but I never actually met him in person until I moved into the apartment. We had a 2-bedroom place, and it was right outside of the city. My roommate's name was Kevin, and he was thin, had longer hair, and was about my age. The apartment that we got was not very nice. It was located in not the best neighborhood, and the building was old and a little bit run down. We had a living room, a small kitchen, and then a hallway where Kevin's room was at one end. The bathroom was sort of across from Kevin's room, and then my bedroom was at the other end of the hallway. I knew that living with Kevin would be temporary, and as soon as I had enough money to move to a better place, I would. After meeting Kevin and moving in, he just seemed a little bit strange. He was not that friendly, and for the most part, he stayed out of my way, which was nice, and I stayed out of his. Kevin seemed to be a pretty private guy, and didn't have much interest in being friends or anything, and that was fine. One thing he did though, was he would forget to lock the main door of our apartment. There was like 5 different times where I know I locked the door and then I would see it unlocked. I tried to talk to him about it once and he kind of blew me off. This made me kind of mad, because many times I remember I would get up to use our only bathroom, which was right across from Kevin's room. So I would have to walk by his door to use the bathroom, and Kevin would be in his bedroom when I was going to use the bathroom a lot of times. When I would start to approach, I would literally hear him locking his door. It was like he was afraid that I was going to try to go into his room, so he was locking it. And I never once tried to enter his room. I never even knocked on his door. So it was annoying how he would always do that, but seemingly forget to lock the front door. In the apartment that we lived in, I would have liked to have the front door locked all the time. Luckily though, my bedroom also had a lock on it. One night I was sleeping, but woke up in the middle of the night. The first thing that I remember after waking up is that I heard somebody right outside my bedroom door. My heart started racing, and I didn't know what to do. Whoever this person was already inside the apartment, probably because Kevin left the door unlocked. I then heard this noise, like somebody was messing around with the lock on my door. Maybe they were trying to pick it. This went on for like a minute, but luckily they didn't get in. I got my phone that was next to my bed, and I called the police. Then I turned on my bedroom light. When this happened, I heard whoever it was moving away from the door and seemingly back out towards the living room. I didn't leave my room until the police arrived. By then, I hadn't heard anything in a long time. I finally left my bedroom and saw that our front door was left unlocked again. The police came in and searched the place. While this was going on, Kevin left his bedroom, apparently woken up by the commotion. He said that he didn't see or hear anything. The police didn't find anybody, and nothing was stolen or missing. I even remember when the police were there, Kevin loudly said to me, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming the whole thing?" I found this comment to be a little bit rude, because I knew that I wasn't. The police also heard him, and I didn't want them to think that I was just imagining the whole thing. The police advised us to keep our door locked, and then they left. After they left, I remember Kevin asking me why I called the cops. It was like he was annoyed that I did. I said because he left the front door unlocked and somebody broke in. Kevin claimed that he didn't leave it unlocked, and he said that our lock must be faulty, but I didn't believe him. I mean, somebody broke into our apartment and tried to get into my bedroom, and Kevin just seemed annoyed by the whole thing. He didn't even seem that concerned. After that, we both went back to our rooms, and I went back to bed. I really couldn't wait to move out of there. Soon, I would have enough money saved up to do so. Several days went by, and everything seemed to be going normal. Then, one night, I was in my bedroom again. Now, usually, I would hang out in my bedroom, and then go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. Then I would return, lock my door, and go to sleep. That was my nightly routine that I had. So on this night, I believe it was a Friday, because I didn't have work the next morning. I know that because I was staying up much later and watching YouTube videos on my phone. It was past the time that I usually went to sleep. I think it was after midnight. I was laying on my bed and my lights were out, but my door was unlocked because I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. I remember all of a sudden seeing my bedroom door start to open. My headphones were in, so I didn't hear anything, but when I saw this, I took them out and looked to the door. After it slowly opened, I saw Kevin entering. When he saw me staring right at him, he stopped, turned around, and then left. I yelled at him, asking what he wanted, but he quickly returned to his room. I thought this was really weird and also creepy. So I got up and brushed my teeth, then locked my door and went to bed. The next day, I asked Kevin what he was doing, and he completely denied it. I couldn't believe it. He suggested that I was having another dream. This made me mad, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I realized that it was probably him the night I had called the police. I don't think anybody else even entered our apartment. I mean, nothing was stolen and nothing was messed up. Plus, the person went right for my room. So I started looking for a new place that same day. Within a week, I moved out. Ever since then, I haven't seen or heard from Kevin, and I'm hoping that I never do. Last year, I was trying to sell my 2007 Mercury Mariner. It was in pretty good shape, but had a lot of miles, and it's kind of old. But overall, it ran very good and is a good car. I decided to list it on Craigslist because I've had experience buying cars on there before. When I had used Craigslist in the past, it had gone pretty well. So I took several pictures of the car and then listed it. The next day, I didn't get any interest at all. But on the second day, I got a response to the ad. The text message came from a man saying that his name was Al and that he wanted to buy the car. He seemed pretty confident about it right away. I was asking a pretty reasonable price, so I gave him my address to come and look at it. Now, I lived in an apartment building. I didn't think it was a big deal to give out the address, because there were several buildings in the complex. My car was already parked out in the parking lot, and the guy would have no way of knowing which apartment was mine. So I asked Al when he was free, and he said he could come by the next day after work at 9 p.m. I said okay, and then I cleaned out the car and got it ready for selling. The following night, I left my apartment building and went to my car in the parking lot. Al showed up shortly after and parked nearby. He got out and I met him by my Mariner. Al was a big guy, had lots of tattoos, was probably about 250 pounds and 6 feet tall. After meeting, I showed Al the car and he looked around at it. After several minutes, he asked to take it for a test drive. I went with him and Al drove the car around the block and down some nearby streets. I remember that he said he liked it and it seemed fine. At that point, I was really thinking that I was going to sell the car that night. After the test drive, we returned to my apartment complex, and he parked the car in the space that it had been before. But then, after we got out of the car, Al just said that he would think about it. I was disappointed, because it seemed like he was going to buy it before. But I just said okay, and then said bye to him. But that's when Al asked me if he could use my bathroom quick. This seemed sketchy. Why did he think it would be okay with me for him to use my bathroom? I said no thanks and started walking away. To me, I was afraid that it might be some sort of a setup. I didn't want this guy coming into my apartment. He was still kind of standing around by my car though. My apartment building had a side door and a front door. The side door was not very far away, so I decided to walk to the front. I left Al standing there and headed inside. I was kind of afraid that he was going to follow me, but when I left and got to the front doors, I looked back and didn't see him at all. This made me feel better, and I entered the building. When I got inside, I turned to the right and then entered the elevator. I took it up to the 3rd floor, which is the level that my apartment was on. When I arrived, I stepped off and started walking to the left, but when I did, I saw the door at the end of the hallway open that led to a stairwell. I saw Al entering the hallway. What was he doing here? At first, I started going towards my door, but then saw Al going towards me. I quickly stopped and then turned and started walking in the opposite direction. At that point, I started to hear Al begin to run in my direction, so I started sprinting to the end of the hallway. When I made it there, I went into the stairs on the other side and ran down. As I was going down the stairs, I heard Al enter the stairwell and continue to chase me. Then I went into the underground parking garage beneath the building. When I got down there, I ran across it to the other end of the building. I had extended my lead on Al a little bit. I heard him get to the parking garage and keep chasing me though. Then I got to the stairs on the other side and ran up them to the ground level, then left through the side door. After I was out of the building, I ran to my car and got inside. Then I just left and drove away. I called the police while driving off and told them about the man. I drove around the streets nearby for a few minutes and then returned. When I did, Al's car was still there and he was not inside of it. The police got there just a couple of minutes later. I didn't go back inside the building until they did, and when they did, they actually found Al attempting to break into another apartment. So it turns out he was never interested in buying my car. I guess he was just going to try to rob me or something. One time, I was going to buy a TV on Craigslist. This was years ago, but I would browse Craigslist at work all the time back then. Several times, I got really good deals, or things for free. You never really knew what you would find there. But you also had to be very careful. So I found this really good deal on a nice TV. I was in the market for one, and the ad looked legit. The price was cheap, but not so cheap that it would make me wonder if it was too good to be true. The pictures of the TV appeared to be in somebody's home. I responded to the advertisement and said that I would like to buy the TV if it was still available. Within an hour, I got a text back from the seller saying that it was available. It was a woman who said her name was Joy. She gave me an address and told me to come over the following night to buy the TV. I looked up the address, and it appeared to be a house in a neighborhood that was maybe 10 minutes away. So the next day, I got the cash and drove to the address. I parked on the side of the street in front of the house in what appeared to be an average neighborhood. I think it was about 7 p.m. When I knocked on the door, it was quickly answered by a woman. She looked to be in her 30s and was about average height with dark hair. She said hi and invited me inside. I stepped into what looked to be the living room of the house. There were boxes around and stuff, as if maybe they were moving. There really wasn't that much furniture, and Joy said sorry that it was a mess, and I said it was fine. She then told me that the TV was in her bedroom. She then led me to the hallway and stopped and opened the door to the bedroom. She said the TV was in there, and I stepped inside. When I did, I noticed that the room appeared to be completely empty though. And right after I got inside, the door slammed shut behind me. It all happened so fast. I looked around and there was no TV in there. I turned back and saw that Joy had closed the door on me. She hadn't even entered the room. I walked over and tried opening the door, but it was locked from the outside. It was so weird. I knocked on the door and asked Joy what was going on, but she did not answer me. I kept trying the door for a minute or two, and it just wouldn't open. Then I was yelling for somebody to open the door, but was getting no response. After realizing that wasn't working, I looked around the room. It was a small bedroom and was completely empty. There was literally no furniture at all. I got out my phone and tried calling my friend, but I was getting no signal in there. I thought that was weird. I tried opening the door and calling for help again, but it was apparent that nobody was going to respond to me. I looked around the room, wondering what on earth was going on. Several minutes into this, and I started to hear noises coming from outside the room. It seemed like they were coming from the living room area. It was joy and the sound of a man's voice. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but I could just hear that they were talking to each other. I yelled again, but got no response. After that, I went over to the window and tried to open it, but for some reason, it wouldn't budge. This angered me, and I went back over to the door and started banging on it as hard as I could. I wanted to break the door down. Then I heard a man's voice yelling at me to stop from down the hallway. I didn't know what these people were capable of. I did stop, but just for a moment. Then I took up my phone and found my alarms. I turned my volume all the way up and started playing the most annoying alarm noise. Then I put my phone at the far side of the room. I then walked over and stood just behind the door on the other side of that. Within probably 30 seconds, I heard somebody walking towards the room. Then they got right outside the door. The door then opened and a man walked in. He turned and first started going towards my phone, making all the noise. I came out from around the corner and ran past him, leaving the room. He tried grabbing me at the last second, but I just barely slipped by him. When I ran out of the room, I went down the hallway. Then, when I got to the living room, I saw Joy standing there. She sort of tried to stop me, but I was going too fast and got around her as well. By now, the man had started to run after me. I opened up the door, and when I was doing so, Joy grabbed at my arm. I just got out the door, though. They were both running towards me, and I sprinted for my car, and luckily still had my keys on me. I unlocked my car, got inside, and sped away from there. Now, sadly, I left my phone, so I couldn't immediately call the police. I stopped at the first gas station that I saw, went inside, and asked an employee to call the police. They got to the gas station, and after talking with police, we went back to the house. They recovered my phone on the side of the street a block up. When they went to the house, nobody was there. I found out that those people did not actually live in the home, and somebody else had been renting it. So I don't know if those two were ever caught. When I looked, the Craigslist post was gone. I just know that I'm never using Craigslist again after that. I'm a male, and this happened roughly 2 years ago. I was selling my old phone on Craigslist after getting a new one. There was nothing wrong with the old phone, and it was only 2 years old. I figured there would be a good market for it, so I listed it on Craigslist. Now I was debating between eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or Craigslist. Obviously, I ended up choosing Craigslist. The price I was asking was pretty good. I didn't care about making a bunch of money off it. I really just wanted to sell the phone fast. And after posting it, I think within a few hours, I got a text message regarding the phone. Somebody told me that they were interested in buying it. I responded to them and said that it was available and they could buy it as soon as they wanted. After texting back and forth a bit longer, I gathered that it was a woman whose name was Molly. We arranged to meet up the following day outside of a local strip mall. It was, I think, located roughly halfway for us both, so it was a good meeting point. The next day, I took my phone and drove to the location to sell it. When I got there, everything went as planned. Molly showed up and bought the phone from me. Then we both went our separate ways. In the encounter, everything seemed normal. We didn't talk a whole lot, but I didn't notice anything strange about Molly at all. Over the next few days, things were fine. But then Molly began to text me. She was texting me telling me to come over, and then asking if she could come to my place. This came relatively out of nowhere. In fact, at first I thought she must have the wrong number. That is, until I saw her mention my name. I mean, we were not hanging out. I was just selling her my iPhone. That was the only time I saw her. And I also did not happen to be interested in her. But even if I was, this was not the way to go about it. She sent about 4 or 5 texts within an hour of each other late one night. I thought maybe she was drunk and that explained the behavior. But she then texted me the next morning as well, once again saying that she wanted to come over. I told her that I had a girlfriend. I didn't, but I just wanted her to leave me alone. She said that didn't matter. Then she continued to text me as if we were best friends or something, saying what's up and asking what I was doing. I was still very confused by all of this. When it continued for another day, I asked her to stop, but she did not. She became angry and started cursing me out and stuff. At that point, I blocked her. I thought that was it, and even that was a pretty crazy story. I mean, I guess you never know what could happen when you use Craigslist. But that very same night, Molly actually showed up at my house. I remember hearing a knock at my front door. During this time, I lived alone in a small house that I rented. When I looked out of the front window, I saw her standing there, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, how did she know where I lived? Had she followed me home? I answered the door, just to tell her to leave me alone. When I opened up though, she instantly started cursing me out. I told her to leave, and she wouldn't. She started to advance forward as if to enter my house. At that point, I slammed the door shut on her and locked it. She tried opening it, and then seemingly ran away. I just know that I saw her running away off the front step. I assumed that she was going, but I was wrong. Probably 30 seconds to a minute later, I heard a noise at one of the back windows. It was like a banging noise. I knew that it was her, and I instantly called the police. Then I sat inside and waited. She was pounding on the window, and then she went over and tried opening up the back door to the house. At one point, I opened up a window a distance away and warned her that I had called the police, but she didn't seem to care. She stayed there, moving from windows to doors and banging on them the entire time until the police showed up. They were finally able to stop her. I ended up having to get a restraining order against Molly. I honestly have no idea why she wouldn't leave me alone. I suspect drug use, but who knows? This has taught me to be more careful when using things like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. For a little bit of background to this story, I live in a quiet neighborhood. It's not in the middle of nowhere, and we have neighbors, but everyone has a little bit more land. I would say most properties are about 2 or 3 acres large. I live with my wife, but when this took place, she was out of town with her best friend. So I had just finished mowing the lawn, and I saw that I got a text message from a new number on my phone. I had no idea as to who it was. The text said the person was from Craigslist, and they wanted to know if they could come over. Now, I have never used Craigslist before in my life, and I was pretty sure my wife hadn't either. I texted back saying that it was the wrong number, and I didn't use Craigslist. Within a short time, I got a response, which was my exact address. Then they said, "This is your address, right?" I was really creeped out when I read it, and I didn't know how to respond. I called my wife and asked her if she had any idea what this could be, but she didn't know. So I just didn't respond to the number, hoping that it was maybe a joke or something. Several hours went by, and then I received another text from this number. This time, the text said, "So can I come over or what?" I responded saying, "No, don't come over. I have nothing for sale." I did not get a response for a while, not until about 10 o'clock that night. There was then a text message from the same number saying, "I'm here." This one really creeped me out. I texted back saying, "Who are you?" The response was that they were from Craigslist, which confused me even more. But it was time to see if this guy was all talk or if he actually showed up. I moved out into the living room and looked out of my front window. The neighborhood typically gets very dark at night and does not have streetlights, so I couldn't really see much. I wasn't noticing any cars in my driveway or on the road or anything. I went over and sat back down on the couch in the family room where I had been. That room was just a ways off of the living room. Probably like 10 seconds after sitting down, I got another text. It said, "Check the front window." I got up and walked into the living room. As soon as I stepped into it, I saw this man standing right outside of the living room window. He was maniacally staring at me with these wide eyes. It was one of the strangest things I've ever seen, and I did not recognize the guy at all. I called the police right then and there. The guy kept standing there for the next minute or so, not moving. Then, suddenly, he just turned and ran off, sprinting out of my sight. The Cops came out and searched all around. The guy had run away though and was gone. I blocked the number and checked out the front window several more times after the police left, but he didn't come back, thankfully. And I haven't seen or heard from the man since then. It's still a big mystery to me though. How did he get my address? And who exactly was he? I really have no idea. My name is Francisco, and I used to work at a sporting goods store when I was younger. This was back when I was like 19 or 20, and lived with my parents when I wasn't at college. I held the job at the sporting goods store since my senior year of high school, and I worked there for about 3 years total. During, I believe, my first summer break from college, there was a newer employee to the store. It was a girl named Emma. She was around my age and was short, had dark hair, and I didn't know anything about her other than that. We didn't have a whole lot of employees at our store. There would maybe be about 5 to 7 of us working at once. Usually 2 at the check lanes and the rest around different departments of the store. I'm not sure exactly when Emma got hired, but she worked there when I got back from college. We worked together a handful of times. I would work both as a cashier and in some other departments as well. A few times I spoke briefly with Emma, but not too much. She seemed cool for the most part, but not really the type of person that I would usually hang out with. I remember that one night, I guess Emma and I both got off at the same time. I believe it was 9 p.m. I had been working near the golf department, and she was in another part of the store. As we were both clocking out, she asked me if I drove there, and I replied that I did. She then asked me if I could give her a ride home. I didn't mind too much, but asked first where she lived. It was a city that was not that far away from mine, and was maybe like 5 minutes out of the way, so not a huge deal. I said yes, and then we left the store together. We got into my car, and she gave me the address to her house, which I drove to. The place was an older-looking apartment complex, where she said that she lived with her boyfriend. She was nice and told me thanks for giving her a ride, and then I left and went home. I didn't think much of the interaction. Now, I worked the next day, an earlier shift. My availability was pretty much all day on most days, because it was summer and I didn't have school. Emma was not working on this day though. I remember that it was like 12 o'clock in the afternoon or something. The store was not very busy, as it usually was quiet at this hour. I was working towards the back, stocking one of the shelves near the baseball equipment. I saw this guy enter the aisle and start aggressively walking over to me. He had dark short hair, like a buzz cut, and the guy was not that tall, but somewhat strong looking. He looked right at me and asked me who I thought I was. I told him I had no idea who he was or what he was talking about. The guy told me that he was Emma's boyfriend and accused me of, quote, trying to take his girl. I realized that there must have been some huge misunderstanding of what happened. Either that or this guy was an extremely jealous boyfriend who didn't trust Emma at all. I really didn't want to get in the middle of their problems. He was like right up in my face, asking if I thought I was a tough guy. I told him to calm down and said I didn't do anything with Emma. I told him she simply asked me for a ride home from work, so I gave her one. The boyfriend then told me that his car was working fine, and she could have asked him. I told him I didn't know that, and further said that I didn't even know she had a boyfriend until she told me the previous night. He seemed to actually calm down a bit. I told him I could assure him that I was not trying to steal his girl, and he had nothing to worry about. He told me that he better not, quote, catch me tripping again, and then he walked away. After the interaction, I was really surprised that he got so angry. I also started to wonder if Emma was stuck in a bad relationship or something. The next time I worked with her was a couple of days later. When I saw her, I walked over and said hi. I told her about what her boyfriend did, and she said sorry, but he gets like that sometimes. I asked her if everything was okay in their relationship. That's when she told me that she actually broke up with him the day before, which would have been the day after he confronted me. She also said that she moved back in with her parents. I told her sorry, and she said that she was fine and happy to be moving on. So after that, I went back to work and didn't see Emma for the rest of my shift. That night, Emma got off at like 7 and I got off at 9 again. After clocking out, I walked through the parking lot to my car. When I got in my car and left, I was followed home by Emma's ex. I know this because a car was parked not that far away from me in the parking lot. I noticed it because the parking lot was almost empty, and after getting inside my car when I started to drive away, the other car left right after me. Because of our two cars being basically the only ones around, I found this a little bit odd. Then when I left, the car made all of the first 3 or 4 turns that I did. When we got to a stoplight, I looked back to see the man was driving. I didn't get an exact look at his face with it being night, but he resembled Emma's boyfriend. I drove the rest of the way home until I got to my street. Then I wasn't really sure what to do. I went around the block twice, with him staying on my tail. Finally, I decided to just pull into my driveway, and I did so and then got out of my car. He pulled into the driveway after me, but I sprinted out of my car really quickly and around the house into the backyard. I didn't look to see what the guy did. I knew that my parents usually kept the sliding glass door in our backyard unlocked, so I quickly got in the house that way. When I looked, the man didn't chase me. I shut the door and then locked it, and then I covered it with blinds. Then I went back around to the front window and looked out. When I did, I saw that the guy was getting back into his car, and he then drove away. I also confirmed that it was in fact Emma's ex-boyfriend. I thought about calling the police, but decided not to. I hoped that this guy would just realize there was no reason to go after me. I didn't work for a few days after that. I just happened to have some off days in a row, which was nice. In this free time, one of the days I went to the mall with a few friends. There was a really large mall not far away from where I lived. We were doing some shopping for a number of things, and I was having a great time until I noticed Emma's ex-boyfriend again, and I didn't think that this was just a coincidence. I didn't feel scared at all because I was with 3 of my friends. When we were in the food court, the guy was sitting a ways away at a table by himself. He was sort of facing us, and I pointed him out to my friends and told them the story. They said we should go up to him, but I said no. I didn't want a big fight to break out or something. So we stayed there and then left a while later. I saw him walking a ways behind us about 30 minutes after that at another location in the mall. It was really creepy. I was honestly so surprised that this guy was after me. Did he seriously think that I was responsible for his breakup? We left the mall later that day, and I didn't see the guy for the rest of it. The next time I worked, Emma also happened to be there. When I saw her, I walked up and asked her how she was doing. She told me that she was doing really good and was going to be moving to Seattle in 2 weeks. We lived in California, so that was a ways away. I told her, "That's great, but your ex-boyfriend is stalking me." She asked me why, and I said probably because he thinks I'm responsible for them breaking up. She said that was crazy and that I had nothing to do with it. I told her to tell him that then, but she said she had him blocked on everything and wasn't going to contact him. I realized that this guy was probably just taking all of his anger out on me, or at least was trying to. I was seriously considering getting the police involved. Once more, Emma got off before me, and I got off work later that night. I walked out to my car and saw another one parked by me again. It was the same guy. This was getting me really angry. But this time, when I got within maybe 10 feet of my car, Emma's ex got out of his. He then started walking over to me, all aggressive. I asked him why he kept following me around, and he didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards me. Then he got right up in my face again and took a swing at me. I moved, but he still got me a little in the side of the head. I took a swing at him, but missed. Then he got me good. I'm embarrassed to say, but I pretty much got the tar kicked out of me. In my opinion, it was clearly not his first fight. For me, it was my first fight since probably the 2nd grade. So he hit me like 4 or 5 times, and I maybe got like 1 or 2 punches to him, which didn't seem to hurt him much. I fell to the ground, and after that, he then walked off and went back into his car. I was just glad that he didn't kick me while I was down. Then he drove off. I gathered myself and then called the police and told them what happened. They came out to my location, and I ended up getting some medical aid on the scene, but overall I was fine. I only had some bruises and scrapes, and luckily no concussion or anything. Finally, I was able to go home. The police said that they would look into the guy. Well, the next day, I got word that he was arrested. Apparently, he already had a warrant for failure to appear on some other charge. I think it was theft. And he had a bit of a history of run-ins with the law. I also filed charges against him for assault. It was a huge relief that he was off the streets and would stop following me. I was really mad for a while about getting mixed up in that whole deal. Looking back, I'm just glad that I'm okay. Last year, I had a really creepy experience. For a little background, I live by myself and have a house. This was the same situation for when this story occurred. It all started when I was at home one night. It was probably like 9 or 10 p.m. Usually I stay up kind of late, so I wasn't about to go to bed or anything. But when I heard a knock on my front door, I did think it was unusual. I walked over and looked out the window. There was a woman standing there. I was unsure if I should open the door or not. I waited to see if she would walk away, but about a minute later, she knocked on the door again. I decided to answer and opened up the door for her. She had long blonde hair, looked to be in her 20s, and was wearing a black sweatshirt. Right when I opened up the door, she asked me if she could come inside. I asked her why. The woman responded, saying that there was some guy that was after her. I told her that I could call the police, but she interrupted me and asked me again if she could just come inside. I didn't let her though. I suggested calling the police again, but she said no. When I asked her why not, she just turned and walked away rather quickly. I was pretty confused. I looked around, trying to see if there was a man anyplace. I didn't see one though. The woman went down the street and was quickly out of my sight. I went back inside after that and then went to bed. By the next day, I had forgotten about the encounter for the most part. I went to work as usual, but after that I was home again and it was later at night. I was in my living room and just noticed out the window somebody walking by out front. It was the same woman as the night before, and she was walking on the street in front of my house. I was not aware of her living in my neighborhood. I had never seen her before until the night prior. It was also unusual for people to walk on the side of my street, so this was overall a very strange situation. When she was in front of my house, she kind of stopped and looked at my house. I noticed this, and then she seemed to kind of notice me looking at the window at her. Then she kept walking past my house down the street. I wasn't quite sure who she was or why she was hanging around my neighborhood all of a sudden. I thought perhaps she had moved in down the street or something, but honestly, I had no idea. I saw her again the very next day though. This time I was driving to work, and I remember that after making it out of my neighborhood, a car was driving behind me. For whatever reason, at the stoplight, I looked at the car behind me in my mirror. The driver looked an awful lot like the woman who I kept seeing. I was almost positive that it was her, but she was wearing sunglasses, so I wasn't quite 100%. It was strange to see her again though, but I didn't even have the thought that she was following me in her car. But as I kept driving, I noticed her making all of the turns that I did. Eventually, I was like 90% there and she was still driving behind me. By now, I was about 99% sure that she was the same woman. It took me about 15 minutes to get to work, and when I got there, she pulled into the parking lot after me. I was shocked. I knew she didn't work here, but when I drove into where I always parked, she drove through the lot a different way. Her car went out of my sight, and I couldn't tell if she was parking or driving away. I just went into work and didn't see her for the rest of the time that I was at work that day or when I was leaving. And for the next 2 days, I didn't see her at all. And I was even a little more suspicious during those 2 days and would look out of my windows a little bit more at night. But I didn't see her at all. Then, one night, once again, I was home by myself. Except this time, it was later, probably a little bit after midnight. I was just about to go to sleep and in my bed. That's when I heard a sort of loud noise. It was coming from what sounded like outside, near the back of my house. I got up and went out to my doorway. That's when I heard another loud noise. This time, it was clear that it came from the back window. Somebody was hitting it with something. I didn't know who it was or what they were doing, so I stayed in my bedroom. I closed the door and then I called the police and told them that I thought somebody was trying to break into my house. A short time later, I heard another loud noise, and then it sounded like somebody was inside. I stayed in my room and quickly locked the door. Whoever was inside of my house slowly walked around, but soon I heard them opening a door a ways away. They never really got that close to my bedroom. Then I stopped hearing any noises. It took me a while to realize that they had likely gone into my basement. For the next 5 minutes or so, everything was silent. Then the police arrived. I ran out of my room to let them in. Once they entered, I let them know that I thought somebody was in my basement. They went down, and a short time later came out with the same woman who I kept seeing. I should have known it was her. I was glad that she wouldn't be bothering me anymore, but I never got an answer. Why was she seemingly stalking me? I still don't know. I'm a female, and the story happened about 2 years ago. I switched jobs around that time, after working in one office building for about a year and a half. There was a better job opportunity for me, so I took it. Now, the first office that I had worked in was not a bad job. I liked most of my coworkers, and there were quite a few people that were in the building. When I started my new job, though, I liked it even more. But not long after starting, one day I got a text from one of my old coworkers. It was a man named Jeremy. Jeremy worked in the office and occasionally would talk to me, but not a whole lot. I always thought that he was a little bit weird and creepy. Several other people around the office did too. It was just based on his personality and some of the things that he would say or do. So he texted me asking me to hang out. It was kind of out of nowhere, and I didn't know why he would do that. I wasn't sure how to respond. Before I did though, he texted me again. I guess I took too long to reply, and he accused me of ignoring him because I had seen the text but not yet responded. It had only been like 2 hours. I finally responded and told him that I would not be available to hang out with him. He asked me why not, and I said that I was just really busy with work and stuff. He didn't respond to me for a few days after that. I forgot about it and didn't think that he would text me again. But then he called me on my cell phone. I was not expecting it and didn't answer. The call was sometime at night, but not that late. After he called me, he left a message. I remember when I played it, I got really creeped out. In the message, he was talking to me about how he knew I wasn't too busy to hang out with him. He said that he knew I didn't even work the previous day and didn't go anywhere. And he was right. I didn't have work and hadn't gone anywhere. But how did he know that? I realized that he must have somehow drove to my house or something. So I texted him, asking him how he knew that I had stayed home the previous day. I remember right after I sent it, I saw the 3 dots indicating that he was typing. This went on for a while and then disappeared without a text. He didn't respond. After that, I started to pay more attention to outside when I was home. The next night, shortly after getting back home from work, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road. It was in one corner which had a good view of my house. I couldn't see inside the car or who was driving or anything. It was too far away, but I was suspicious. Nothing else weird happened that night though. But the next night, I received another phone call from Jeremy, this time at 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't hear it or see it until the next morning because I had been asleep. He did not leave a message though. I texted him asking him why he called me at 1 a.m. and why he was being so weird. He did not respond, so I decided to block him, something that I should have done long before. But I thought maybe he would give me some sort of explanation or something. For the next couple of days, everything was fine. Then I got back home sort of late from work. Afterwards, I was just planning to go to bed and was really tired. But about 20 minutes after arriving back to my house, I heard a knock at the front door. I walked over and looked to see Jeremy standing there. I foolishly decided to answer. I was thinking that I could talk to him and be clear that I wanted him to leave me alone. As soon as I opened up the door, Jeremy rushed inside and started to grab me. We struggled very briefly and I was able to free myself. It all happened so fast, it's kind of a blur in my memory. I just remember him charging at me and then I got away. I ran outside of the house, which was my first instinct for some reason. Jeremy started to go after me. I ran through my front yard and into the street. Then I went into my neighbor's yard across the street. But surprisingly, Jeremy stopped chasing me when he got to the street. I saw that he ran in a different direction. Then he ran to the corner and got inside of a car and drove away. I went back inside after that and called the cops. They came out a short time later, and I told them everything I could about Jeremy. Long story short, I got a restraining order against him, and he hasn't bothered me since.